What I love about your story is that you didn't set out to build a startup. You didn't set out to raise money. You had a problem that you were experiencing yourself and you decided to build a solution for it, and then you just chased the problem.
I got the idea for it when I was in college. I started developing an app for myself and friends to apply to apartments more easily. Once I started bringing the app to landlords or showing it to landlords that they're like, this is great, but you didn't change any of our side. And I was like, I assumed you loved your side. They're like, no.
Welcome to InvestSmart with Steadily. I'm the CEO and founder. Have the pleasure of talking to Ryan Barone today. He's the CEO and founder of RentRedi. Ryan, thanks very much for coming on the show today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. You are a founder that started the company, I believe, just 6 months after you graduated from college. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
How did that come to be?
So it actually started because I got the idea for it when I was in college. I was studying at Pace University here in New York City, and I double majored in economics and math, minored in computer science. I was living in dorms at the time. It was my sophomore year of college, and I'd gotten my first internship, my first big internship to get to stay in New York. Goldman Sachs is walking distance from from Pace in the financial district, and that felt like kind of my chance to move out of dorms, get my own apartment, work there for the summer, walk to Pace for the rest of the school year. And we found this great apartment. It was myself, two friends from school. We all had guarantors because we were students at the time. And ultimately, we ended up missing out on the apartment because we didn't have all of the documents we needed to apply to it. Things like W-2, letter of employment, bank statements, tax returns. And so we ended up missing out on this apartment we loved that would have been walking distance to school, walking distance to our internships. I ended up living about 100 blocks away from both of those.
And that's quite a ways in New York.
Yeah, it was definitely a lesson for me to figure out a better way to rent an apartment next time. Not necessarily find one, but at least to rent it. And so really I started developing an app for myself and friends to apply to apartments more easily. And that was really just the start of it. It was not necessarily saying I want to start a company or solve any particular problem other than we as tenants would like to be able to apply and have an easy experience. And interestingly enough, a lot of the time what you start out doing isn't what you end up doing. And it was definitely one of those cases where once I started bringing the app to landlords or showing it to landlords that they're like, this is great, but you didn't change any of our side. And I was like, I assumed you loved your side. You didn't want your side changed. They're like, no, if we're not this massive property manager, we're basically cast aside to pen and paper and spreadsheets. And so we're handling cash and checks, and we're handling all of these documents over email, and we're getting calls in the middle of the night for maintenance and all this communication. And it really naturally developed over the course of 8 years from what began as developing an app for tenants to really being the most comprehensive platform for independent landlords, these self-managing landlords that want to manage it all themselves but don't want to pull their hair out handling all of the rent and maintenance and communication and screening and all of that. And also a great experience for the tenants that they bring it to. And so it's been a joy, honestly, to get to build it for both.
What I love about your story is that you didn't set out to build a startup. You didn't set out to raise money. You had a problem that you were experiencing yourself and you decided to build a solution for it, and then you just chased the problem.
Right. Yeah. And quite the opposite from the fundraising side of things. We didn't raise any money for the first 3 years. To be honest, I had no concept of raising money or my co-founder. And the idea was just to build something that helped people. And our first investors were actually landlords on the platform. And not because we went to them to pitch investing in RentRedi, but just because we were talking about the platform and they were using it. And then eventually said, hey, are you raising any money? Can we invest in this? We think this would help a lot more people. And so our first investors were actually landlords themselves that felt like more landlords should have access to this. And if they could help back us to help us get off the ground faster and bring more people on and more resources, that it would help everybody. And they were right. And so about 3 years in, we ended up raising our first venture round, and that helped us scale and grow our team and bring it to a lot more people. But yeah, absolutely. To your point, it's just solve a problem. And that's really what I think even to this day we love more than anything is what is the problem that a landlord or a tenant or both are having, and how can we be a part of that, either by connecting with somebody else as a partner. We don't necessarily have to like build it or do it ourselves. If we're a connector to that, we're happy with that. Or by improving something on the platform, building something on the platform that helps them achieve that.
I mean, what a huge vote of confidence that your users want to put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed is you work with a family member. I do as well. My sister is my co-founder, so I'm really curious to hear what that family dynamic is like. Like, do you guys talk about RentRedi at Thanksgiving, or do you have like a strict separation of like no talking about this at home?
We do. So, I mean, I grew up in a family where my mom's side of the business had a produce store for about 100 years that she was a big part of. Everybody in her family was a big part of. From my dad's side, he had grown his own company's sales and marketing side, especially for years. Even, my grandpa was like a dentist, and he ran his dentist practice out of my great grandma's downstairs of her home and all of that. So I think like the view of like being able to talk about what you're doing and what you're building, quote unquote, work wise, that holidays was always an okay thing, and just kind of was like part of your life that you were talking about more so than that it was talking about work. And so for me,
no work-life balance. It's all just blended together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way I view it is like, it's a dream to get to do what I get to do. Also, I get to do it with somebody that I love and that, is important to me in my life. So I was able to, when I was leaving that full-time job and saying, okay, I'm doing RentRedi full-time, got this product. So one day called up my parents, said I was leaving that job. And so I think most people are lucky if their parents say, we believe in you and good luck. I asked my dad to, be my co-founder in RentRedi. And so my dad is my co-founder. He's helped me scale the company to what it is today and been a huge part of that.
So how you were in the stairwell coding this yourself.
Yeah.
And you're 21, 22, 6 months out of college. How long were you the only code committer until you were like, okay, it's time to bring on a second developer?
Yeah. So our first full-time hire was 2019. So from like
so you were must have been three years in at that point.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's founder code just everywhere, for better or for worse.
I wish it was faster, but it was a long road for sure to that first full time.
That's amazing. And so, I mean, this is your chance to toot your own horn. Like, how big are you guys now? Like, how big is your team, and how many properties are you helping to manage these days?
So we're about 50 people on the team in total
amazing.
now. And we have about $28 billion in assets under management in terms of landlords actively managing across all 50 states, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. focused for now. But yeah, about $28 billion in assets under management that they're managing on the platform.
It's amazing. It's a crazy story. And you guys haven't had to raise like a ton of capital to do it. Like, you're not quite bootstrapped, but it's not like you're hemorrhaging money and just on the fundraising treadmill.
No, absolutely not. And I think like the focus for us has very much been on, are we solving someone's pain point? I remember when our very first investor, TI Ventures, did their due diligence. They talked to landlords on our platform. And I think part of the reason we haven't needed to raise as much is because I think it's a combination of kind of being like a scrappy bunch that really loves what they do and is willing to kind of get like their hands dirty no matter what level you are in RentRedi. But also the fact that like we're building a product that's based on those pain points. And so when TIA did their interviews with customers, they came back and said it was, some of their best customer due diligence they had done. And really from the standpoint of like one of their questions is like, hey, if we take this away and we brought it back 6 months later, would you be happy with that if it was, twice as good? And like something that really matters to people, they're like, absolutely not. Don't take this away from me. And they said, we got quite a few swear words from people in asking that question. And we assured them that's not actually happening, but it answers the question of, is this thing important to you? Is it solving a pain point for you? And so, I think that's been an important piece of how we were growing at that phase, but a big part of what we've internalized and made sure to intentionally keep a part of the business as we've grown as a team, scaled as a team, to still have that same initial mentality.
This is are you making vitamins or are you making Vicodin? Like, is it a true painkiller? And the best startups are the ones that are like, they're making something that really.
That's a great way of putting it. I like that.
Yeah. Probably less politically correct. I'll find another better metaphor for it. So for our listeners, who should contact you? Who's the ideal customer profile that gets the most value out of working with RentRedi?
Yeah, so a lot of the customers that come to us, and we constantly doing surveys, still like 90% of our customers are coming from pen and paper and spreadsheets. They have as little as one single family home to 100 plus units. We intentionally focus on the not, massive 10,000 unit plus property management portfolio. I think there's some great solutions out there for it, but I think the really underserved side of the market that we've really focused on is that, anywhere from one single family home to a few multifamily units, and you're trying to scale your portfolio. One of our biggest joys is getting to see somebody come on with 2, 5, 10, 15 units, and a year or two in with us have scaled that 2 to 10 or 20, or that 20 to 50, 70, 100 plus. And so our goal is to eliminate a lot of that manual work that they would do themselves through syndicating listings and screening tenants and handling the rent collection and tracking all of their communication with tenants and all of that. And once they free up that brain space and all of that manual work, it lets them start to focus on, okay, how do I grow my portfolio more, right? Like we talked about RentRedi scaling, but like, what about that? What about them scaling themselves? And so that's our end goal. That's the person I think that gets the most out of the platform.
You must see tons of patterns in the data, given just the sheer size. I mean, more than 20 billion in property on your portfolio. How is the rental market today? What's different about it compared to, let's say, 2019, before things went crazy? Like, how should the modern landlord be approaching it differently than they might have 5 years ago?
Yeah, there definitely was a lot of shifts that happened between 2019 and today. Some of it was really pointed things that we saw through COVID that were especially COVID related initially. Things like digital lease signing was something we didn't have on the platform pre-2019 or 2020 COVID, simply because we built most of this platform off of individual stories of individual landlords and the problems they were facing. At that point, that wasn't as much in demand. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden you didn't want someone to hand you a piece of paper that they had written on, or you didn't even want to meet someone in person to sign that lease. And so we built in digital lease signing as a response to them talking to us and saying, hey, can you solve this very specific pain point? But there's also been ones that have been more prolonged, which I thought were really interesting. When we look at the evolution of even our own rental suite, we started with something as simple as saying the initial problem we heard from people was the check is in the mail excuse. I want to get rid of the check is in the mail excuse. I call a tenant up and say, have you paid rent? Where is it? Oh, it's in the mail. It's in the mail. So, okay, how do we create this instant tracking? Maybe the funds aren't instantly available, but for certain if that person has, quote unquote, put the check in the mail or not. And so that was our first step of integrating payments for rent collection into the platform, was eliminating that and being able to instantly track that the tenant had initiated that payment and you being able to see that. But things like COVID 2020, fast forwarding, it went from things like being able to deposit to different bank accounts by properties to now new regulation came out about having to separate security deposits versus rent into different accounts. So then we built in the ability to deposit to different bank accounts. And then eventually, especially with eviction moratoriums, and even since after them, we've seen a big shift in the mindset of both landlords and tenants in terms of any incentives you can build in to pay rent on time, the better. And so one that actually came from tenants and landlords both on our platform is basically saying, can you incentivize my tenant, or can you incentivize me as the tenant to pay my rent on time? And so what we built out was a way to report the rent we were already helping them collect on the platform to all three of the bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, so that tenant can then build credit just by paying the rent on time. And so it's, again, kind of reducing some of that stress for the tenant, right? It makes it easier for them to get a car loan or a home loan or anything else in the future because they have better credit. But we've also seen a 13 percentage point increase in on-time rent payments as a result of offering.
That's huge.
Yeah,
wow.
It's been huge. So to the point that initially we thought,
and it's free. That's the best part. I was expecting you to say, "Oh, and there are these 2% rebates or what have you," but it's free. It's just it's a pure win-win for both sides.
Yeah. So initially, like for us, it's basically like an add-on that the tenant can add. And so initially, the tenant was the one to ask for this. So we offered it to them and said, "Hey, tenants, like you can add this on for a nominal couple bucks." And then eventually landlords were saying, "Hey, the tenants that are opting into this are paying so much more. Can I just cover this for my tenants and make it a free service to my tenants?" We said, "Yeah, you can do that. We'll make that for you." And so that's what we've done. And so now landlords have the choice. If they would say, "Hey, I don't want to cover it. The tenant can do it if they want to, but that's on them," then they can. And it's very cheap for them to do, next to nothing for them to do. Or vice versa, if the landlord says, "Hey, I want this to be an amenity of living in my property. I want to increase my on-time rental payments rate. Okay, for a couple bucks for a unit, I all of a sudden now get my rent on time 13% more often."
Amazing. That is super cool. What's next for you guys? What should we be on the lookout for in the next version?
Yeah, so I think one of the big ones right now is we've been moving over in the past couple months and really going live now with all of our landlords is really the most accessible accelerated payments that we've seen in especially this part of the industry, but really across the industry. The speed of getting funding is really important, especially for independent landlords. There's not as much float of extra funds sitting around, and you need to pay your mortgage, other bills you have, whatever it might be. And traditionally on regular ACH rails, outside of RentRedi, even just no matter what platform you're on, what that looked like was like a 5-day funding period, 4 or 5 day business day period, which with weekends could sometimes stretch to almost like a Monday to Monday cycle, or at best a Monday to Thursday, Friday cycle. And so one of the big things that we have been working on over this past year is saying, is there a way that we can provide landlords with those funds faster, but also not get into this cycle where we've seen people do in the past, where you're basically like fronting the money up front and then the money claws back when the tenant doesn't have the funds. Right. And this creates this accounting nightmare. Can we actually settle funds faster? And so that's what we've actually been able to accomplish, which is a huge win for us this year, where basically any landlord that comes onto the platform tomorrow has this accelerated ACH where funds are out of the tenant's account same day, which we've seen a dramatic improvement in reduction of those returns that just make the accounting life from a landlord so much nicer, because the funds are out of the account so fast that, especially with the balance checks we do, then your likelihood of any sort of return is just drastically minimized. And as a result, you're then getting those funds 2 days. So like a tenant pays on Monday and it's funds availability in your account on Wednesday, which just for a lot of our landlords has been a lot of excitement just around being able to have those funds sooner, being able to use them sooner, not having so much, of a waiting period in terms of the checking and settlement of those funds without avoiding the accounting nightmares.
Well, given the pace that you're improving the software and what you've already shipped, it's completely understandable why RentRedi is one of the most popular property management tools for our customers. You've been a fantastic partner to Steadily, and really appreciate you taking the time to chat today.
Of course. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think like partnerships like Steadily are honestly some of my favorite parts of the platform. I think realistically, you're solving a really important pain point for customers. And if we can be a way to help connect landlords to solving that pain point, then that's our goal more than anything, kind of be that central system that helps plug landlords into services like Steadily and other partners that we have as well around just different parts of their business, make it easier for them to ultimately manage it themselves and make everything a little easier.
It's all about solving a real problem. Well, thanks again.
Thanks too. Appreciate it, Darren.